Anxiety of Words, 제퍼 프레스가 출판을 한 시집이에요. 선집이에요. 2006년에 출판이 되었었거든요. 그때 김혜순 선생님이 시애틀에 오셨어요. 매년마다 하는 컨퍼런스가 있거든요. 거기에 오셔서 같이 낭독도 한 번 했었어요. 그때 선생님하고 같이 시 낭독을 했기 때문에 참 좋았어요. 제가 지금 끝난 번역 시집이요. 김혜순 선생님 시집 날개 환상통. 이해하기도 어렵고 언어도 굉장히 어렵고 그래서 번역하는 할 때 김혜순 선생님한테 질문을 많이 보냈어요. 왜냐면은 그 시의 주제, subject 그리고 누가 말을 하는지 시를 읽을 때 그게 너무나 애매했어요. 그래서 그런 거를 많이 선생님한테 질문을 던지고 선생님이 저한테 답을 해주시면서 많이 도움을 받게 되었어요. Sorrow Toothpaste, Mirror Cream 이라는 시집이 있어요. 제가 번역한 거. 그 안에서 I'm okay, I'm pig이라는 시가 있는데요. 그 시를 제가 굉장히 좋아해요. 그 시에서 여러 장면이 나오는데 돼지들이 고문을 받고 고통을 받고 죽음을 경험을 하고 아주 불쌍하게 억울하게 죽는 장면들이 많이 나와요. 그런 장면들은 한국 현대 역사 중에 안에서 한국 사람들이 많이 고통을 받았던 경험을 쓰신 그 장면들이에요. 그래서 참 중요한 시라고 생각하고 사람 대신 인간 대신 돼지 몸, 돼지 목소리를 내시면서 쓰신 시가 너무나 훌륭하다고 생각했어요, 저는. Bloom pig. A horde of healthy pigs, like young strong men, get thrown into the pit. They cry in the grave. They cry standing on two legs, not four. They cry with dirt over their heads. It's not that I can't stand the pain, it's the shame. Inside the grave, stomachs filled with broth and gas. Stomachs burst inside the grave. They boil up like a crummy stew. Blood flows out the grave. On a rainy night, fishy-smelling pig goes flash, flash. Busted intestine tunnel their way up from the grave and soar above the mound. A resurrection. Intestine is alive like a snake. Bloom pig, fly pig. Boars come and tear into the pigs. A flock of eagles comes and tears into the pigs. Night of internal organs raining down from the sky. Night of flashing decapitated pigs. Fearful night, unable to discard pig, even if I die and die again. Night filled with pig squeals from all over. Night of screams, I'm pig, pig. Night when pigs bloom, dangling, dangling from the pig tree. 김혜순 선생님이 창작하는 언어는 비스럴하고 이미지가 굉장히 뚜렷하게 나오는 언어예요. 그 언어에서 동물들이 많이 나오는데 쥐들도 나오고 쓰레기도 많이 나오고 버려진 그 동물들, 버려진 목소리 그런 목소리들을 제가 또 받아서 영어로 옮기는 일을 하는 게 참 매력적이라고 생각해요. 영어로서는 그 여잔지 남잔지 he, she, 프로나운이 굉장히 뚜렷하게 나와야 되잖아요. 한국어는 subject 없이도 쓸 수 있고 pronouns 별로 쓰지 않고 그래서 저는 항상 선생님한테 이 사람이 여자예요, 남자예요? 그가 누구예요? 항상 그런 질문을 던지고 있어요. 시에 나오는 리듬, 톤, 목소리 그런 거를 다시 영어로 살려야 된다고 생각해요. 뜻만 아니라. 물론 영어하고 한국어하고 그 문법은 굉장히 다르잖아요. 그 문법도 생각하면서 하지만은 뜻보다 그런 감각, 경험, 그 언어를 다시 어떻게 경험을 할 수 있는지. 그래서 미국에서 그 독자들이 선생님 시를 읽을 때 창의롭게 경험할 수 있게 시를 살리는 게 굉장히 중요하다고 생각해요.
In our headlines on this Thursday, May 15th, here in South Korea. Economy amid the growing presence of artificial intelligence, the key focus of pledges by presidential contenders as they address voters with promises to promote public livelihood. Meanwhile, trade ministers of the APEC forum are gathered in Korea's southern island of Jeju for their annual meeting, which began today and lasts until tomorrow amid the backdrop of US tariff threats. Also, here in South Korea today, that is May 15th, marks Teachers' Day, and advocates are calling for greater commitment to protecting the rights of teachers within the academic arena. We are now counting down 19 days to the June 3rd election, and the Liberal Party candidate continues his trek across the country, this time to his party's stronghold. For details, I have our political correspondent Shin Ha-young standing by live. Ha-young, welcome. So Lee Jae-myung is now targeting voters in Jeollanam-do province, I hear.
You're right, Sunny. After spending the past few days trying to win support in traditionally conservative stronghold regions, Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung is now focusing on rallying support in his party's strongholds. His campaign trail today takes him through Jeollanam-do province, including the cities of Gwangyang, Yeosu, Suncheon, and Mokpo. Kicking off his tour of this region, he pointed to the concentration of power in the capital area as the biggest problem South Korea is facing. And he also emphasized balanced regional development, which is one of Lee's 10 major campaign pledges. In line with this, he highlighted fostering the renewable energy industry as a pledge tailored to the Jeollado provinces, saying the southwest coast holds great potential for renewables. Take a listen.
We don't have a clear plan for renewables yet as we move away from fossil fuels due to global warming. Energy prices are likely to go up, so we need to develop our own resources. That's why I think we should actively grow the renewable energy industry, especially in the southwestern coast and Jeollado provinces.
He began his fourth day of campaigning in Hadong, Gyeongsangnam-do province, near the border between Jeollado and Gyeongsang-do provinces. There he met with young people at the Page Market to discuss concerns about jobs, housing, and childcare. The choice of location and participants from different regions reflected his intention to promote regional harmony.
And Jae-myung, what can you tell us about the messages he shared in other cities in the region?
Well, Sunny, he visited Gwangyang, promising to strengthen the steel and logistics industries. During his speech, he also criticized former President Yoon Suk-yeol for misunderstanding his role as a president. Take a listen.
If someone forgets they're a public servant and starts acting like a ruler, they should be held accountable. One such person who misunderstood his position was former President Yoon.
During his visit to Yeosu, he laid out his plan for the energy industry, pledging to turn the Jeollanam-do coast into a global renewable energy hub. He also said the region has plenty of resources but lacks transmission lines, promising to fix the issue and unlock the area's full energy potential. And he will wrap up Thursday's campaigning in Bokpo, the birthplace of former Liberal President Kim Dae-jun. That's all for this hour. Sunny?
All right, Jae-myung, thank you for that coverage from the Liberal camp. Up next, we turn to the Conservative camp, whose contender Kim Moon-soo is back in the capital city after a three-day tour of the southeastern part of the country. For more on this, I have my colleague Kim Do-yeon joining me live. Do-yeon, it's great to have you on. So Kim is back here in Seoul. What has he been saying?
That's right, Sunny. Kim is back in the capital, and while there weren't any big rallies for supporters, he did stop by here during the day multiple times, possibly taking time to sort of regroup the campaign committee before he heads out again. But one of the big moments came as he held a press briefing here. He apologized once again for the declaration of martial law by the party's former president. Take a listen.
So I sincerely and respectfully apologize to those struggling to make a living outside of the capital region, to many whose lives have become more difficult, to those feeling weighed down or disheartened, and to all affected by the deepening divisions in public opinion.
Kim called the martial law declaration inappropriate, saying even if it's within a president's authority, it should only be used in true national emergencies beyond what the police can handle. As for impeached former President Yoon Suk-yeol, Kim made clear he has no plans to expel him, saying that the decision to leave is up to Yoon himself. That comment came, of course, after the party's new interim leader, Kim Yong-tae, told the media that the idea of expulsion could be considered during the campaign, and he reiterated this point just moments ago, saying that he will suggest it to President Yoon himself. Now, all this reflects Kim's balancing act, trying to hold onto party loyalists while also reaching out to undecided voters, many of whom opposed the martial law move.
Meanwhile, Do-yeon, I hear the Conservative Party, it's also ramping up its rebuke of the Liberal Party's pressure on the Supreme Court. Could you explain this for us?
Sunny, that's right. One of the tactics that the PPP has had all along was to emphasize DP Lee Jae-myung's legal risks. Now, we saw the Supreme Court recently send a bill back to a high court for a guilty ruling on him. So after that, the DP has been pressuring the Supreme Court, trying to summon Chief Justice Cho Hee-dae for a hearing, and even starting a bill for a special probe into him with a potential impeachment motion as well. And because of this, Kim and PPP lawmakers took the time to go to the Supreme Court to protest against DP's actions. Take a listen.
They say democracy is about the rule of law. But have you ever seen anything so absurd? A criminal threatening a judge, summoning a judge for a hearing, launching a special investigation into a judge, or even trying to impeach a judge. Have you ever heard of such madness?
Now, in the meantime, Kim also tried to appeal his diplomatic side to voters by visiting interim U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Joseph Yoon, at his residence. While the two's discussion is undisclosed due to diplomatic reasons, Kim's chief of staff says the two discussed the Korean Peninsula and tariff issues candidly. That's all for now. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Do-yeon, thank you for that coverage from the Conservative camp. Also on the campaign trail, Reform Party candidate Lee Jae-myung sat down with students at Seoul National University of Education in light of Teachers' Day today. The talks took place as expected over lunch as he continued his campus cafeteria outreach to college students. Earlier on this Thursday, he announced prison reform, proposing inmates participate in higher value labor such as machinery assembly and digital operations rather than simple tasks like sewing and cleaning. He added such labor would serve to raise the standard of economic and social contribution by those incarcerated. Meanwhile, in response to inquiry about a collision with the main conservative camp, he condemned those seeking, quote, political engineering. And economy amid the growing presence of artificial intelligence is a key focus of the presidential contenders as they address voters with pledges to promote national interests. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
One theme is impossible to miss in the candidates' pledges as the country gears up for a pivotal presidential election: the economy. Both leading candidates, Lee Jae-myung and Kim Moon-soo, have packed their campaigns with economic and business-oriented policies, reflecting rising voter anxiety over Korea's stunted growth trajectory and external uncertainties. This year, there is an unprecedented emphasis on artificial intelligence, with Lee Jae-myung listing it as his top pledge, while Kim Moon-soo places the initiative second.
We need to take a look at what role our national community should play in preparing for an AI-driven society.
For the initial takeoff, we need to pour in concentrated funding and scout top talent from around the world.
Both propose mobilizing 100 trillion Korean won in investment, approximately $71 billion, but their approaches differ. E focuses on universal access through the AI for All project, which would offer free advanced AI services, including a Korean version of ChatGPT to all citizens. In contrast, Kim aims to strengthen the entire AI ecosystem by supporting unicorn firms and training 200,000 young AI professionals through expanded AI graduate programs and software-centric universities. Although less prominent in the polls, Lee Jae-myung, the former People Power Party leader, now running as a third-party candidate, addresses AI in his pledges to improve regulations and foster talent. Another pressing issue in this election is trade, particularly as reciprocal tariff exemptions from the United States expire just a month after the elections. Kim's top pledge is an immediate South Korea-US summit and the launch of new tariff negotiations. Lee takes a more cautious approach, saying that negotiations with Washington need to be taken at a slow pace. While he acknowledges the need to respond pragmatically to shifts in the global order, he provides fewer details about trade or alliance building. Despite these differences, both candidates deliver the same message. The economy is the defining issue of this election. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, trade officials of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation have kicked off their two-day meeting in the southern island of Jeju today against the backdrop of tougher trade conditions in light of U.S. tariffs. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji is there.
Top trade officials from 21 Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation member states, including the U.S. and China, have gathered here on Jeju Island ahead of the APEC Leaders Summit later this year. Led by South Korea's Minister for Trade Chung In-gyu, this is the first time in 20 years that the country is hosting the APEC Trade Ministers meeting.
I hope today's MRT meeting will lay a solid foundation for dialogue and collaboration to overcome the political and economic challenges as well as uncertainties that we encounter.
Speaking at a separate press briefing ahead of the meeting on Thursday, the director of the APEC Policy Support Unit said it's important to continue to hold talks on de-escalating trade tensions to reduce policy uncertainty and improve responsiveness to new challenges.
There are a lot of things that governments can do, but here in APEC, I think the priority now is to promote dialogue and cooperation to tackle challenges.
This year's event especially drew a lot of attention as major APEC member countries are seeking trade deals with the United States after President Trump announced a sweeping set of tariffs in April. Eyes are on South Korea's Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy, An Deok-gun's meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer on Friday, which will take place on the sidelines of the APEC meeting. This comes 3 weeks after they last met in Washington, where South Korea requested exemptions from reciprocal tariffs, while offering cooperation on shipbuilding and energy. Both sides are currently working to produce a package of deals to remove new U.S. tariffs before the July 8th deadline, when the 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs is lifted. And with trade officials from the U.S. and China both here in Jeju, a meeting between them on Thursday afternoon is also being closely watched, especially after the two countries last weekend in Geneva agreed to temporarily lower most tariffs in a bid to defuse the trade war. Eyes are now on whether they will be able to come up with further deals on tariff cuts or export controls. 배은지, Arirang News, Jeju.
Today, that is May 15th, is Teachers' Day here in South Korea, and at one special school, students whose guardians went to great lengths to offer them a new lease on life are sharing their own gratitude to their teachers. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil files this report.
At first glance, it looks like any other Teachers' Day celebration in South Korea. Students handing over carnations, writing thank you notes, and singing songs for their teachers. But at this school, those small gestures carry a different weight. Hangyeole Middle and High in Gyeonggi-do Province is the only school in South Korea dedicated to students from North Korean backgrounds, whether they arrived themselves or were born to defectors, sometimes even in third countries along the way. Here at Hangyeole School, where all the students come from North Korean backgrounds, Teachers' Day may seem like any other, but it also reflects how they're adjusting to life here in the South.
It wouldn't be fun if they knew, so we planned it all in secret. That made it way better.
These teachers honestly feel like lifesavers to me. I don't usually get to thank them, so this was my chance.
It's more than a surprise event. It's a milestone in their journey of adapting to a new culture and life.
I hope this stays with them as a good memory, and maybe one day they'll pass it on to their own students.
With 115 students enrolled, 31 in the middle school, Hangyeole offers more than academics. Teachers here often step in as mentors and guardians, helping students bridge two very different worlds.
We follow the national curriculum, but also help students adjust socially, emotionally, and for the future. Some still speak with a North Korean accent, but they're finding their place here with confidence.
Named after the word for one people, Hangyeole is more than just a school. It's a place where students with North Korean backgrounds begin to shape new lives. For them, this is one of many moments helping to build that life in the South. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
In other news, the U.S. State Department has extended its travel ban on North Korea for the 9th straight year. Now, this latest extension is set to take effect on September 1st. It will reportedly remain in place until the end of August next year, unless, of course, it is further extended or lifted amid threats to the safety of Americans. U.S. President Donald Trump has sealed a defense and economic deal with Qatar worth some $1.2 trillion. Our Shin Se-byuk has details.
U.S. President Donald Trump, currently on a 4-day Gulf tour, signed a series of major security and economic agreements worth at least $1.2 trillion with Qatar on Wednesday. This came after Trump signed a similar multi-billion-dollar deal with Saudi Arabia the day before. According to the White House, the package aims to boost U.S. exports and attract foreign investment in exchange for enhanced security cooperation. The package includes a record-breaking deal for American aircraft maker Boeing to supply Qatar Airways.
From Boeing, that's the largest order of jets in the history of Boeing. That's pretty good. It's over $200 billion but 160 in terms of the jets. That's fantastic. So that's a record, Kelly.
The White House said the plane contract between the two countries is expected to support some 154,000 American jobs annually. Additionally, U.S. energy engineering firm McDermott has entered into a partnership with Qatar Energy to develop critical energy infrastructure through 7 projects worth $8.5 billion. Defense deals were also part of the package. Raytheon secured a contract worth $1 billion to bolster Qatar's drone defense capabilities. And General Atomics signed an agreement worth $2 billion to supply the Gulf state with unmanned military aircraft. The White House added that both sides signed a letter of intent to strengthen security cooperation, including support for Qatar's air and maritime defense systems and burden sharing at the Al Udeid Air Base, which is the largest U.S. military base in the region. Trump is set to conclude his trip on Thursday with a final stop in the United Arab Emirates. 신세벽, Arirang News.
Russia has released the names of its delegates to peace talks in Turkey this week with their Ukrainian counterparts, and Vladimir Putin is not on the list. Our Lee Jae-myung has the latest.
After remaining silent on who's headed to Istanbul for peace talks with Ukraine, the Kremlin has finally announced the list of officials taking part. The delegation will be led by presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky, who was present at the first attempt at peace talks in Istanbul back in March 2022. Along with Medinsky, Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzin, Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Fomin, and the chief of Russia's military intelligence agency, Igor Kostyakov, will also be at the talks. Not on the list, though, is Russian President Vladimir Putin, who many speculated could be involved in direct talks. Despite a much-anticipated sit-down between Putin and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, no such talks appear to be on the horizon. With Putin seemingly out of the picture, U.S. President Donald Trump has also decided not to go to Istanbul. According to Reuters on Wednesday, citing a Trump administration official, Trump has decided to skip the peace talks. The U.S. leader has said over the past week that he was considering coming to mediate talks, raising hopes for a trilateral summit between the leaders of the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. Zelensky had called on both leaders to come to Istanbul and also said the presence of Trump could have a major impact on the negotiations. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, come tomorrow, that is Friday, the army here ends its engineering training for troops from 5 UN peacekeeping nations. The six-week session that began in early April is the first of its kind to be held in South Korea. The Korean Army offered heavy equipment training to 28 soldiers from 5 Asian countries that provide boots on the ground for UN peacekeeping missions. Another engineering session organized by the South Korean Army will take place in Cambodia later this year.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Following U.S. President Donald Trump's reinstatement of a maximum pressure policy on Iran and a series of recent nuclear talks between Washington and Tehran, the United States has issued new sanctions targeting Iran's ballistic missile program. On Wednesday, the U.S. Treasury Department unveiled fresh sanctions aimed at curbing Iran's efforts to domestically manufacture components for ballistic missiles. The announcement came during President Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia, where he emphasized the need for Iran to cease its nuclear ambitions and activities aimed at destabilizing the region. He stated that Iran must stop sponsoring terror and end its support for regional proxy groups. He also made an appeal to Iran to reach a nuclear deal amid ongoing indirect negotiations between the U.S. and Iran mediated by Oman. He expressed his hope to see Iran thrive and mentioned that he's counting on Qatar to help facilitate the process. To strengthen relations with Latin America and increase China's influence in the region, Chinese President Xi Jinping hosted a summit with leaders from Latin America following a previous summit with his Brazilian counterpart. On Tuesday, President Xi convened the fourth ministerial meeting of the China CELAC Forum in Beijing and welcomed Presidents Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil, Gustavo Petro of Colombia, and Gabriel Boric of Chile. There, China pledged an approximately $10 billion credit line to support projects in Latin America and offered visa-free travel to citizens of some countries in the region. Colombia has also joined China's Belt and Road Initiative, and agreements have been made for more cooperation in clean energy, artificial intelligence, and infrastructure development. Pope Leo XIV will officially inaugurate his papacy with a mass in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican on Sunday, May 18th. During the mass, he will receive the pallium, a white woolen stole worn over the shoulders, and the fisherman's ring, traditional symbols of papal authority. While addressing members of the Eastern Catholic Churches on Wednesday, he vowed every effort to work for peace in the Middle East and Ukraine. The pontiff also made his first social media post on his official Instagram and X accounts on Tuesday, reiterating peace. The new pope shared several photos of his first few days after being elected on May 8th, along with the message, "Peace be with you all," in English and several other languages. In Austria, two new giant pandas from China, female Lan Yuan and male He Feng, found new homes in Vienna's Schönbrunn Zoo on Wednesday. The 5-year-old panda's arrival follows the return of the zoo's previous panda pair to China in late 2024 and is part of a new round of a 10-year conservation cooperation between Austria and China, which began in 2003. The China Wildlife Conservation Association and Schönbrunn Zoo have prepared and made every effort to ensure the safe and smooth arrival of the young pandas to the zoo after they underwent a quarantine period since their initial arrival in Vienna in April. The pandas can now be seen by the public in their newly renovated enclosure at the zoo. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
It rained in most areas except the Seoul metropolitan area today. It will continue to rain mainly in the southern parts of the country tomorrow. In particular, heavy rain will be concentrated around Jeju Island and the south coast. In the mountainous areas of Jeju Island, there will be strong rain of around 20 to 30 millimeters per hour. There will be showers around the central parts of the country tomorrow afternoon. The amount of rainfall is not too much at around 5 to 20 millimeters, but there is a possibility of sudden heavy rain, gusty winds, thunder, lightning, and hail. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Chuncheon will start off at 16 degrees Celsius, Gwangju at 19 degrees. Highs will move up to 24 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, 25 degrees in Daejeon and Gyeongju. Clear skies will come back on Sunday across the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Panel session is coming up next.
제21대 대통령 재외선거.
세계 어느 곳에 있어도
내가 국가대표라는 마음으로
누구보다 땀 흘리죠.
지금이 국가대표임을
보여줄 기회.
대한민국 국민의 권리.
대한민국 국민의 의무.
반드시
투표합니다. 국가를 위한 대통령 투표. 제21대 대통령 재외선거. 중앙선거관리위원회
2025 celebrates the 80th anniversary of liberation. A place filled with culture, history, and diverse experiences. This is the Independence Hall of Korea. Upholding the values of the independence movement, and together with the whole nation, we will make Korea great. The Independence Hall of Korea.
Samsung Electronics has unveiled a super-thin smartphone, while Google Maps is renewing its call for access to detailed geographical data of South Korea. With more on these headlines and others on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Press Perspective. It's Thursday, May 15th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. It's that time of the week yet again during which we discuss a diverse collection of news stories related to South Korea. For this, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German news agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, it's great to have you here.
Nice to be here.
I also have Kelly Kasulis-Cho with American Daily, The Washington Post here as well. Kelly, as always, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here as always.
Fabian, we'll start with you. Let's begin with the response to Samsung's Galaxy S25 Edge that the company officials hope will help them maintain their dominant presence in the global smartphone market. What are the pros and cons to this super thin device?
Yeah, as you said, it's super thin. I mean, maybe to give you some context, the global smartphone market is very heated. You have a lot of competition. Samsung dominates, but there's a head-to-head race with Apple. Then you have, of course, the Chinese competitors, Xiaomi, for example, in third place. And you need a lot of differentiation to basically set yourself apart and to have some innovations and get better, get more innovative to basically gain the customer. And I think Samsung did that with the S25 Edge in terms of the form factor or the portability. It's extremely thin. I mean, 5.8 millimeter, and it's kind of what actually some users have been saying, which is even more astonishing, that it's very light. I mean, just I think about 160 grams around that, and that is quite appealing to the Gen Z, to the very young generation. And the promise by Samsung is that you don't have to sacrifice on the performance of the phone. To a large degree, that is correct, but in some reviews, I found some cons. They say that we would have wished that the charging speed would be faster, and actually the lifespan of the battery could also be longer. Those were some of the complaints that I heard, but overall, I think the reviews were quite well. From my perspective, I would say the phone is not cheap. For example, when it hits the US market, it will be around $1,100 in the basic form. So yeah, it's not a cheap phone, but it has all the latest, integrated AI, super good camera and all that. So I guess it's for those customers who want to have a premium phone.
Right, who are tech savvy then. Kelly, staying with news related to technology, Google Maps reportedly has limited functionality here in South Korea, affecting travel, of course, among foreign visitors to the country. Could you tell us more about this, including the reasons?
Yeah, I think this is one of the funny anomalies or kind of ironies about South Korea, is that it has one of the highest smartphone penetration rates in the world in terms of users. Elderly people are just as savvy on their smartphones as pretty much everyone else here. Very technologically advanced society, really fast data and internet. And yet we have these strange technological quirks here. So for instance, Internet Explorer for a long time was the only browser that you could use on government websites. So one of these little quirks about Korea is that Google Maps, it does work here. It just doesn't have like street view or satellite view. And it's a little wonky, if you will. It's not really integrated into Korean society. So for instance, some restaurants that are maybe really popular with foreign tourists might be on there, whereas some Korean businesses might not register their restaurants at all. Do I think this is a big national issue? Not necessarily, but I do think it speaks to some broader themes in Korea. So for instance, the reason why this is the case is that more than 10 years ago, Korea had legislation that essentially said that because of potential security threats related to North Korea, they didn't want this kind of technology, so street view or satellite imagery being kind of made universal here. Their argument is that there are domestic military facilities that need to remain blurred. There's also some privacy concerns broadly there. And so, I mean, this kind of speaks to some of the quirks that happen here, being a society that is still, at least on paper, technically at war with a close neighbor. The other thing is, a lot of people argue that it's kind of more so Korean market protectionism. If you look at Uber, for instance, there was a lot of resistance to Uber integrating into South Korean society. And for a while, it was basically not allowed in the country until the taxi businesses here were able to integrate with a ride-sharing kind of calling app, so Kakao Taxi, which is universally used. Now some people are using Uber, but there were a lot of barriers that these kind of foreign companies have to overcome when they're coming into South Korea. South Korea wants to protect its own conglomerates and its own technology industry, and so some people argue that's what's actually happening with Google Maps. But if you're a foreigner coming here and you need walking directions to, your closest subway station, it'll serve you just fine.
Right. Do you use Kakao Map, by the way? Naver Map, is it?
I use Kakao, and Naver. Yeah, I don't use Google.
All right. Fabian, also in related news, Google, for its part, though, it's recently renewed its push for access to more detailed geographical data of South Korea. And there are some pundits here who fear that this might actually become a card on the table of broader bilateral trade talks between Seoul and Washington, that is. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that could very well happen. So actually, it's not the first time that Google has asked to be able to use those high-precision map data. It's already the third time that they have asked for permission by the South Korean government. The previous two times, I think in 2007, 2016, it failed. They were rejected out of national security concerns. Now, I think actually from the perspective of Google, it's really a good chance because those trade negotiations are ongoing and South Korea is under pressure to throw in some bargaining chips. They have to deliver something to the US side to get the tariffs down. I mean, that could be, for example, one incentive to use it as leverage. However, from the local conglomerates perspective, it is concerning right now in terms of the apps that you use for local maps. Actually, Google Maps is, I think, not even within the top 3. I think it's on 4th place. You have, for example, Kakao Map, Naver Map, T-Map. So, I mean, you have the local services. And, of course, they don't want to open the market or get another competitor. But from a customer perspective, I mean, I think, yeah, competition can be good. Whether it works out for Google to get access to the high-precision map data, I don't know. But it could very well be.
Right. Kelly, in other news, the annual Space House competition, it took place this past weekend here in Seoul. Now, just for your information, last year's champion was actually a colleague here at Arirang. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular competition, Space Out competition, and what are your takeaways with regard to its popularity here in the country?
Well, this is always one of those fun annual stories that come out of Korea. We see, for instance, staring contests in the West, but a space out contest is something that I feel like Korea really needs. I think people need more time spacing out and being left to their tranquil thoughts. But from my understanding, I haven't attended one of these yet, unfortunately, which is a shame because I've been here like more than 8 years. But from my understanding, there's usually about 100 participants. So it's not like this wild, like national hot trend or anything like that, but it makes the news locally and internationally every year. So there's like 100 people that basically will space out for 90 minutes. They're not allowed to sleep and they're not allowed to check their phones. And then people spectate on these people spacing out and they vote on their 10 favorites. I don't know if that's based on like who has the best blank stare expression or who's just the most attractive. I'm not really sure. But then when they narrow it down to the 10, basically the winner is also determined by who has the most stable heart rate throughout all of this, which again is super bizarre. It's like, I guess who is able to space out without stressing is the winner. I'm very interested to hear which Arirang colleague won in previous years. But I think the reason why this is a fun story in Korea is Korea's kind of known for being this hyper-wired, always on your phone, overstressed, overworked society. And so I think this is kind of seen as like this fun vacation from your own kind of daily hyper-wired life, or vacation from your thoughts, if you will. It's a country where there's this pressure to always better yourself and to always be productive and to use your free time, which is often very limited, well. So, you know, you often talk to Korean people and it's like after their 60-hour-a-week job, they're taking like a professional K-pop dancing class, or they're learning how to be like a professional grade barista, or my favorite, all of my friends who are Korean seem to be going to real estate classes after work. And so I think the idea of this celebration is just be unproductive and space out, just chill for a little bit.
Right, and yet adults in the past, though, I remember my grandmother talking about how idleness was the devil's workshop, was it? Or the devil's work?
Yeah, I think there's an
like
expression like that in the States as well. Yeah.
Called on you to be more productive, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I don't think the Gen Zs are saying that.
Right. This competition, Fabienne, space out competition, it's gained quite a bit of attention in neighbouring countries, with Japan and Australia holding their own competitions, that is. How do you explain this phenomenon?
Really, I thought about that a lot. I think it's actually quite interesting to analyze it from a psychological point of view. I mean, I come from a generation where, at least in the early part of my childhood, there was no internet yet, and I kind of saw the transition and how everything became more digital. I think Kelly actually already mentioned some of the reasons, but you know, first of all, the pressure has increased to perform well, and that not only applies to your workplace, but also in your private life. There's the feeling you have to self-optimize in every aspect of your life, and at the same time, everything is digital. Smartphone addiction is a very big problem, and basically what that leads to is that if you consume social media a lot, have a lot of screen time every day, you have the feeling that you always need this dopamine rush, this validation, this kick that you need, this entertainment. You cannot be alone anymore with your own thoughts. You cannot just, calm down and do nothing. And I think the young generation now rediscovers that actually it's important to be able to be in harmony with yourself, to slow down, not always seek distraction, not always look at your phone. What I find, however, a little bit ironic is that in the end, those competitions or those trends, I'll give you one example, which was also very huge in Europe, that it was a competition to be on a long distance flight or in a long train ride and try to only stare out the window or just in front of you and not, watch a movie or whatever. And then people will put a hashtag on it and upload some video on it. And in the end, those trends are consumed on social media, on your phone, and you need this kind of a hype about it. But actually, it's enough. Just go into the forest, walk a little bit, be by yourself, and I think you can also achieve the same effect.
Right, for sure. Kelly, today here in Korea, it's Teachers' Day. May 15th is Teachers' Day here in Korea. I understand National Teachers' Day in the US also falls in the month of May. It's like the first Tuesday of the full week, or the first full week of May.
Yeah, I actually had to look this up because it's not as big of a cultural mainstay in the United States as it is in South Korea. In fact, I didn't even remember that there was a National Teachers' Day. I think growing up, maybe the principal on the intercom said something like, "Thank your teachers," and that was basically it. We weren't bringing in presents. It wasn't something that I think we as students or our parents really acknowledged, whereas in Korea, it is kind of like a day to give gifts or to show some kind of affection towards teachers. I think historically that was rooted in the fact that up until about 20 years ago, the South Korean education system was pretty harsh. I mean, corporal punishment was allowed. Teachers were very punitive, if you will, and so a lot of parents often would kind of, butter up the teacher under this kind of undertone of, treat my child well, and also the competitive nature of Korean society and the fact that test scores and things like that can really determine your future. I think a lot of parents felt that, currying favor with a teacher can only help your child's future, literally down to where they go to school and the kind of income they'll make further down the line. So I think that's where the popularity of this holiday was maybe rooted. I've definitely heard things like parents being stressed out about scraping together extra bucks to buy the teacher a good present. And a couple of years ago, South Korea actually started regulating this and saying that you can't give a gift to a teacher above around $45 US. And part of that was to tamp down the pressure, the economic pressure that was being put on parents, as well as to equalize things maybe in the classroom. Because I think the concern was if one student, if their parents are giving Chanel perfume, and the other parents are giving an apple, which is kind of the cliche gift that you see in movies in America that you give a parent. I think the idea was that there would be some kind of discrepancy in the treatment of students. Yeah.
Right, and in recent times, Fabienne, Teachers' Day here in the country, it's been linked to talk about the need to come up with ways to better protect the rights of teachers within the academic arena. What have you been hearing on the ground here in the country?
Yeah, actually, I've also experienced a little bit of it myself. A long time ago, actually, I was a teacher. I mean, only as a side job, but at a very prestigious foreign language high school in Seoul. I taught like some German conversation classes. So for me, it was really just a side job. But you know, I had some insight in there. And on the one hand, I was very impressed by how well respected teachers can be, and that is one part of it, but there's also another side of it, and that is the immense pressure that teachers face. Of course, as a foreigner here at the school who's not fully integrated in this high school, I think I did not face all the pressure, but it was quite tough when you see students who basically depend so much on the score, and you have such a lot of responsibility. And I quit after half a year because I didn't find myself qualified enough and also to handle with that pressure, because you have a lot of authority about the future life of a young student. And what I also saw, and what was very big in the media, is that a lot of, especially young teachers, they face so much pressure, not so much by the students, but by their parents. And that can be very, very uncomfortable. And unfortunately, there were also some suicides among young teachers, and also linked to a lot of pressure and also harassment that they faced on their workplace. And Kelly actually mentioned that there were, a long time ago, there was even corporal punishment, and that, you know, maybe children were not protected as much. But in 2014, there was a law enacted to basically prevent child molestation, or I'm not sure the technical term of the law, but there was one passage which basically says that you can report a person for child abuse without providing any evidence, and that this law has been basically abused, exploited by some teachers who basically report teachers without providing evidence. And when there was a survey, 2022, I think, by a teachers union, 60% of the people who answered that survey, teachers, said that they either themselves have been reported for child abuse, or they know someone directly in their among their colleagues who have been reported. So they feel that there's so much pressure against them that can be used by parents, and I think they don't see their rights very well protected, and that needs to be changed, I think.
Right, of course. Now, the campaign to ensure the rights of teachers, it's not simply a Korean task, it's a task for schools across the world, we could say. What can you tell us, Kelly, about the efforts elsewhere, beyond borders, to ensure the rights of teachers?
Yeah, I think I'll just add to Fabian's comments to start that I think, you know, in terms of the protests that really exploded in 2013 after a couple of high-profile news stories about young teachers dying by suicide, what was one big point of contention is the fact that in South Korea, teachers are contacted after hours endlessly. I think one investigation into a teacher's suicide found something like 1,500 after hours text messages and lots of evidence of harassment and abuse by parents. So this is something we see being discussed around the world as well. In the United States, particularly because some states that tend to be more far-right leaning have passed legislation that could, you know, potentially cause criminal legal recourse against teachers for teaching about things like Black history or LGBTQ rights, things like that. There's been a lot of discourse lately about kind of an abuse of the legal system to punish teachers or to go after teachers who are simply trying to educate. In the UK, there was an interesting story I saw from The Guardian suggesting that 9% of its teaching workforce quit within a singular year. This article was from 2023. A lot of these stories from around the world, they usually tend to say that teachers are highly underpaid, they're not appreciated, parents are really tough on them. There's usually some kind of legal system or issue where, you know, one small accusation or one small misstep could, you know, be a suspension or the loss of their job. And so it's just becoming less and less enticing of a profession. Here in South Korea, I saw something called like the monster parent checklist that went viral in light of these protests in 2023. And there was actually like a test that was created by someone online that basically would show signs and symptoms of whether or not someone is a monster parent. And some of the things on that list were the belief that teachers should be young and beautiful, the belief that calling teachers late at night is acceptable, and the belief that if a teacher doesn't share their personal contact information with a parent, that must mean that they have no love or care for the student. And so I think South Korea is kind of a more extreme example. I don't believe in the US there's an expectation that a teacher would share their cell phone number with a parent. In fact, I think that would be found quite jarring if a parent requested that. But I think what we're seeing in general is that the position of educator in many societies is just simply not made enticing enough to keep our smartest, most talented people in those positions.
Right. Fabian, do you suppose that the fact that we are actually having debate in the country about ways to better protect teachers, as well as, of course, take into consideration the need to protect the rights of students themselves, the fact that we're having this particular debate is perhaps an indication that we may be a step closer, perhaps, to finding a productive solution to the problem at hand?
Well, that's really difficult to tell, but I would say, of course, having that debate is always the first step in recognizing that there's a problem. Yeah, but I must say there are also structural problems. One thing we should look at is, are teachers getting paid enough? But I mean, maybe to add also a positive note on it, I would say that the idea of the teacher normatively in the society actually is still very well respected. I mean, in a Confucian society, the teacher holds a very special role. And to some degree, I think you can still feel that in South Korea as well. When I compare to Germany, for example, there are even some more drastic examples of sometimes even physical violence against a teacher, which, I mean, I think is really outrageous. But yeah, I mean, teachers, they offer a very valuable service to society that should be appreciated. And of course, when teachers abuse their power, then that's crossing a line. But on the other hand, we should also have some awareness that it could go the other way around, that actually the rights of teachers can also be violated.
Right, indeed, indeed. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this session. Fabian, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Kelly, thank you very much for your insights. Thank you. Right, that ends Press Perspective for this Thursday. We'll return same time tomorrow with a look at trade talks amid US tariffs.